Adam, you are the defendant's brother, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm Charles' brother.
And you are living with Charles right now, is that correct?
Yeah,
And the reason you're living with Charles right now is because your parents died when you were 5 years old?
they died in a car crash.
Living with Charles has been kind of neat almost, hasn't it? It's been fun.
Yeah, it's fun. We have a good time together. We play together.
Matter of fact, Charles, who is your brother, is also almost like a buddy, almost like a really good friend, besides being someone who's looking out for you. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, he's my friend, my good friend, my best friend, probably.
He plays ball with you, isn't that correct?
Yeah,
He coaches your baseball team, isn't that correct?
yeah, really.
And he even makes decisions looking out for your best interest, isn't that correct?
I don't understand.
On a Friday night, if you want to go out and play on Saturday or Sunday, he will have you do your homework so you can make sure you're ahead of the game so you don't have to do it on the weekend, isn't that correct?
Yeah, well, I'm not allowed to play on the weekends unless I finish my homework.
And that's because Charles kind of enforces that within you, isn't that correct? Charles, that was good, I take that back. Now Charles does everything, like I said, to look out for your best interest, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And without Charles, you would be in a situation where you would have no place to live, isn't that correct? No actual family.
Objection, Your Honor. Could the counsel please state the relevancy of these questions?
I'm just going to show bias, Your Honor, that this witness would testify to do anything to...
Overruled.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Overrule the objection.
So, basically, the question I'd ask is that without Charles, you really would have no other place to live and no other relative to live with, isn't that correct?
No, it's not true. I have an Uncle Harold that will take care of me.
But you would rather live with Charles.
Like, Charles is my brother. I love him.
So, being that you would rather live with Charles and not live with your Uncle Harold, you would not like to be in that situation with your Uncle Harold, isn't that correct?
I mean, Uncle Harold, is my uncle, and Charles is my brother. I'd rather live with Charles.
Okay, so one final question on this area is that being that you would rather be with Charles, you would probably do anything to make sure you could stay with a man who plays ball with you, who coaches your little league team. Basically, the person who loves you more than anybody in this world, you would rather be with him, isn't that correct?
I would rather be with him. That's correct.
Okay, let's move away from that right now. Going to the night of September 12th, you remember that evening?
Yes.
You testified that you had to remember that evening. Around 8 o'clock, you said you were doing your homework in the kitchen, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you were sitting at the kitchen table, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Your Honor, may I admit mark for identification diagram of the kitchen area just to make it easier for the court and for the witness? It's the exact same.
All right, you marked as defense exhibit
Excuse me, Your Honor.
I'm sorry.
for identification, show the opposing counsel.
I don't know how this works. I think it's
If you unscrew the top,
You're not completely good in it.
I'm a law school. I don't understand these things.
So,
You?
I guess it.
Okay, thank you. So like I said, you were sitting at the kitchen table doing your homework, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And the chair that you were sitting in was facing directly at the side of the refrigerator with its back to a window, isn't that correct?
Well, I had a straight, clear path across the front of the refrigerator.
Okay, but from now looking at the diagram, you were sitting right here where it's marked AB, isn't that correct?
Right there.
And you had a direct view of the icebox right here, isn't that correct? A direct view of the side of the icebox, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, also where you were sitting, just to kind of set up the room a little bit more, there was the pantry on the left-hand side, which blocked the entrance from where the person you identified as Mr. Ewing would eventually come in, isn't that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, now while you were doing your homework, you heard your brother talking to a gentleman out in the other room, in the living room, isn't that correct?
Yes.
But you never saw the man who he was actually talking to.
Not until I came inside the kitchen, though.
Well, before you get to that, you did hear a doorbell ring, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
So you don't know if it was actually the man your brother was talking to in that other room, or the man who actually came in when the doorbell rang, isn't that correct? You don't know if the person who walked into the kitchen was the person your brother was talking to.
Yeah, well, I mean, who else could it be?
Well, it could have been the person who rang the doorbell.
There was
stated that it wasn't the doorbell.
Yes, try and frame them in the form of a question.
Okay, in your statement, you did say that the doorbell rang, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you did say that prior to that, you heard your brother talking to a gentleman in the other room, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
So it's safe to assume that there was a person in the room talking to your brother, the doorbell rang by another person. So obviously there were two separate people, isn't that correct? The
No.
person in the living room would not have rung the doorbell outside your house.
Oh, you say my brother was in the room and someone else. If that's what you're saying, that's true. My brother was in the room and someone rang the doorbell and then he came inside.
Okay, so you don't know. I'll move on. Now, you said when you were doing your homework, a gentleman came walking into the room. Gentleman you identified as David Ewing, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
And you said that he walked to the icebox, isn't that correct?
You know, he talked to me first, but then he went over the dice box.
He talked to you first.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when he went to the icebox, he approached the icebox and he opened up the icebox door, isn't that correct? Can,
1 minute, counsel.
excuse me?
1 minute.
Okay, Dave, now imagining this, again, we did say that you were sitting right in this chair with a direct sight to the side of the icebox. We opened up the refrigerator door. Mr. Ewing, according to your statement, opened up the refrigerator door.
Right.
The refrigerator door opens from left to right, isn't that correct?
Right.
And Mr. Ewing then stepped into the refrigerator door, isn't that correct? He opened the door and he stepped in, isn't that correct?
Right.
And from where you were sitting with a perfect sight of the side of the refrigerator door, when that door was open, that door was in between you and Mr. Ewing, and you could not have seen what was transpiring within inside the refrigerator, isn't that correct?
No, well, I couldn't see all the way into the refrigerator. I could see him, pull something out of his pocket and put it in the refrigerator.
But you didn't actually, you're saying that with the door open, you could see him inside the refrigerator?
Well, I could see it, yeah, I could see it.
Okay. And are you testifying right now that you could see him put something into the refrigerator?
Yes.
Okay. Just so you know, did you know what kind of refrigerator that it is you have?
Yeah, it's maybe.
Okay, it's an Igloo refrigerator. That is correct. And the Igloo refrigerator that you would know has a standard door and standard hinge on the door.
Right.
So the Igloo door, according to the diagram that you did look at and you approved of and you said that everything was correct, only opens up to about 45 degrees, isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. The diagram is not really clear, as counsel would state.
But the witness did state that he has an Igloo refrigerator and any standard instruction manual or anything would show you the depth of the door opening up, Your Honor.
If counsel wants to proffer such evidence, you should have it in court.
Agreed.
Okay.
Will be sustained.
Now, you said that you didn't actually see him put something into the refrigerator. You didn't actually see him put anything into the refrigerator, isn't that correct?
No, I just saw him reach into the fridge.
So-
Last question, counsel.
I have 15 seconds to wrap up with a couple more, Your Honor.
Yes.
So for you to actually see him place something into the refrigerator, you would have had to have gotten up from your chair, walked around the kitchen table, and in front of the refrigerator to actually see him put something into the refrigerator, isn't that correct? To actually see him put it in.
To actually see him place it on the shelf, yeah.
And you did not do that, isn't that correct?
No,
Because if you did do that, you would have told the police that night when you gave me your statement, isn't that correct?
well, no, I didn't know what he was putting in the fridge.
But if you did get up to see him put something in, you would have told the police, isn't that correct?
No, but they was putting something in my fridge. Why?
Because that's what you're testifying to right now.
Saying that they put it in the fridge. I didn't say it was
Last question, counsel.
something wrong with it.
Thank you. You mentioned, I believe, Mr. Scott and Mr. Smith, you were in the military?
Yes.
At any point in time while you were in the military, were you ever court-martialed or have any reprimand while you were in the service?
No, sir. No.
Okay, what ranks did you reach?
I was a sergeant in the Air Force.
Mr. Scott?
I was a sergeant in the Army.
Okay. Just a few questions that I'll throw it out to all of you. We can take it from here. Do all of you believe that a person is innocent until proven guilty? And I'll just work my way down. Mr. Smith, starting with you.
Yes, I do.
Mrs. O'Connor? Mr. Scott?
Yes.
And Mr. Freeland? And you mentioned jury. Now, do you all understand what the burden of proof is all about? That in a criminal case, it is up to the state here to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, get it in your mind that's beyond a reasonable doubt to convict a person. Whereas like in a civil case, it's through the preponderance of the evidence. Do you understand what all that is about?
Yes.
I'm not sure. I've seen it on TV. I think I did.
And what was your impression when you got it on TV after everything was over with? And,
Well, you got to be real sure.
okay, and Mr. Creel?
I think it means that if there's any chance that he might not have done it, then he's not guilty.
I'm sorry?
My understanding is that if there's any chance, if I think that there's a chance that he did not do it, then he's not guilty.
All right, I'm just going to ask individually now, just some questions. Mr. Creel, I'll start with you. Do you think that Dan Jones has done something wrong, and that's why we're all here right now?
Well, yeah, otherwise we wouldn't be here if someone didn't think he did something wrong.
Mr. Scott mentioned he watched some television shows. Have you seen some of those same shows, the same law shows that are on TV?
Probably.
And you've seen that at times when a person has come out, say they're trying that person, and later on it's found that he's not guilty. In fact, have you seen shows like that?
Sure.
So do you understand that in fact the person can be here on trial, but in fact they might not be guilty?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Scott, this question is to you. Right now, we haven't started the case yet. You haven't heard any evidence, and you haven't seen any witnesses yet. And if Judge Emus here asked you right this second to come up with a guilty or not guilty verdict, what would your decision be?
I don't think I could do it. I don't know any. I just heard you talk and heard the DA talk. I'll see how I can make a decision.
So it would be difficult to come up with a guilty or not guilty verdict.
I don't think there'd be any way I could do it.
Do you feel that to get a true picture, this is for Ms. O'Connor, do you feel to get a true picture of what's happened up here, do you think Dan Jones has to take the stand?
No, I think that the district attorney has to show me that Dan Jones has done something wrong.
And Mr. Scott, back to you. If Dan Jones doesn't take the stand, do you think that might show that he's hiding something?
It's not his job to take the stand. It's up to the DA to show he did something.
Okay, and Mr. Smith, same question. Do you think that Dan Jones has to take the stand to testify on his own behalf?
No, sir.
Are any of your family members here, are any of them alcoholics? Sorry, I know it's a strange question.
My father was.
Your father was. So you've been around alcoholics, and do you seem to have a good grasp of the disease alcoholism?
Yes.
Are any of your friends heavy drinkers?
Well, most of the guys on the job like to go out on Friday night. There's a couple guys that can really put them away.
Okay, and so when you go out with your friends and you're drinking, do you have I'll take it back, we'll just move on from there, thank you. And Mrs. O'Connor, you said that your father was an alcoholic, so you've been in the presence of an alcoholic. Have any of the rest of you been in the presence of an alcoholic? And how did you know that that person was an alcoholic? Was it just your perception, or did someone tell you that?
He drank 17 beers one evening.
So in your mind, does that make him an alcoholic?
Every time we go out, he drinks 17 beers.
Okay, and Mr. Scott?
We had a guy like that at work, and we didn't take him out with us anymore on Fridays. His wife wouldn't let him come either.
Now, a question, I'd like to hear all your answers on this. Do you think alcoholism is a disease, or do you think it's just a person who goes out, just drinks a little bit too much, and just doesn't know when to say no, and just likes to have a good time? I'll start with you, Mr. Smith.
I think it's a disease, yes.
And Mrs. O'Connor?
Disease.
Mr. Scott?
Yeah, disease, the guy I knew he couldn't control.
And Mr. Creel?
There's a lack of character.
I'm sorry?
I think someone who drinks too much has a lack of character, no willpower.
Do you think a person who is an alcoholic can control that alcoholism?
If they want to.
Are any of the members here, are any of you members of MAD or SAG, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or Students Against Drunk Driving?
My wife is a member.
Have you ever participated in any of the meetings?
She conducts them in my kitchen, so I guess you could say I did, yeah.
And what do you think about those organizations?
I think they're fine. They try to do a good thing for society.
And the rest of you? I'm sorry, I didn't.
What's the
Mrs.
question?
O'Connor, I'm sorry? Mr. Scott?
There were a bunch of questions. Which question?
I'm sorry, are you or any of your members of your family a member of MAD or SAG?
No.
None of the members of my family.
Okay. One final question. If you could be involved in law enforcement, if you could be a police officer or the street cop, or if you could be an investigator or a detective, one who kind of pieces the puzzle together and comes up with the conclusion that brings us all here where we are today, would you rather be a police officer out in the street making the arrest, or would you rather be the investigator after the fact, piecing everything together? Mr. Smith, I'll start with you.
I'd rather be an investigator in instance afterwards.
And Mrs. O'Connor?
I'd rather be an investigator.
And Mr. Scott?
I wouldn't want to be a cop. They're always hassling people over parking and stuff like that. I wouldn't want anything to do with it.
Did you say, I'm sorry, that you were involved with a cop before? That you were involved in?
No, I've been pulled over for speeding and things like that, but I've never been arrested or anything like that.
And Mr. Creo?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Scott. I wouldn't want to be a police officer either.
Okay. And I'm sorry, and I said that was the last question. One last question. Would any of you have a problem if you were elected to the jury being here right now? Would you have a problem being here for, say, if this case went on for a week? Mr. Creel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I got a lot of business, you know. I mean, I got better things to do than this. But if I have to do it, I'll do it. But I don't want to, but I'll do it if I have to.
Thank you, John. Mr. Scott?
It's the off season for us. I don't have any jobs. I'm set for the next month or two.
And Mrs. O'Connor?
I think the school board would let me serve.
Be away from the kids. And Mr. Smith?
I can use the vacation, so I would hope that y'all pick me.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That's good.
Now, you mentioned that you met Trudy through your job at the Truck Stop Cafe, isn't that correct?
Right.
And both of you were waitresses and knew each other for approximately 9 months.
That sounds about right.
In fact, she lived with you for about 6 months.
Yes.
And during that time Trudy lived with you, you obviously got to know her. You knew her personality. You could see her perks and her just her different personalities.
Yes.
Now, you knew at the time that Trudy could be moody and other times she'd be depressed.
Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Doyle's character is not on trial.
You knew that she was in the process of a divorce,
Yes.
and you also knew that she had a little boy that was staying with her mother. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. In capital city.
Absolutely, that's correct. You also knew John Diamond through Trudy. Isn't that correct?
Mm-hmm.
John was the guy Trudy had been dating, and in fact, Trudy moved out of your apartment to stay with John. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Through all her moodiness and her tough times with her child and her divorce, John seemed to be the person that was there for her. Isn't that correct?
Well, if you mean that she was happy when she was living with John, yeah. The answer is yeah.
And in fact, 4 days before the actual shooting, John saved her life when she tried to commit suicide. Isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Prejudicial. Objection, Your Honor. Prejudicial.
Yes, I'm sure it is. Are there any other grounds?
I don't see any relevancy.
What is the relevance, counsel?
I'm just trying to show that this witness, Your Honor, is a close friend of Trudy and has a bias towards the defendant because of everything that has happened.
A bias toward the defendant?
A bias against the defendant, excuse me.
And I assume you want to go sidebar to discuss this in greater detail.
Yeah. Yes, Your Honor.
What is the relevance of eliciting the fact that he saved her from suicide have to do with establishing a bias against your client?
I just want to show that the witness here, like I said, has a bias against my client.
How,
And
I understand what you want to show. Where's the nexus? That's what I'm asking. How does the fact, let's assume you're right. Let's assume that Beth Kelly says yes, that's true. Your client did save Trudy's life when she tried to commit suicide. What's the relevance?
Well, my next question was going to be, if I may.
Yeah. Just proffer me what the relevance is, that's all.
Okay, I was gonna bring it in where Ms. Kelly here resented my client, and that the things that she saw from
Because he saved her life?
well, and then my question after that was going to be that
Just counsel, I don't care what the questions are,
Okay.
just tell me why it's relevant. For any reason, just give me some relevance.
because John took Trudy away from her, John took her out of the apartment, so it's costing. Not only is it costing her roommate, which it's expensive times, the person has bills to pay, things like that. So if he took her out of the apartment, second of all, the person who was a friend of hers is taken away from that.
Counsel is saying that the witness is perjuring herself because she's angry with the defendant for having taken her roommate away.
ridiculous. Is there any other basis for your getting your testimony concerning the prior suicide?
Just to
I'm going to sustain the objection.
John had been training Trudy to protect herself with judo and how to use a handgun, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
And you knew that John had given her a handgun as a gift, correct?
To be honest, I don't really remember her having a gun.
Now, in the cafe, there were a lot of truck drivers who would come in. So the protection that John was teaching, how to protect yourself, that John was teaching Trudy was obviously a good protective device, is that correct?
Yeah, more than once I've been accosted by one of those truck drivers.
All right, now let's go to the events on December 1st, if you could. You said you arrived at about 5:30, 5:45,
Correct.
and Trudy would get off work at about 6 a.m., is that correct?
Mm-hmm. I mean, John would come and pick her up.
And when you arrived, was John already there?
You know, he must have been there because he didn't come in through the front. He must have been sitting in the back
In
one of
fact,
the booths.
I apologize.
He must have been there because he came out of nowhere, but he must have been sitting in the booths because I know he didn't come in through the front door.
He was there a lot of mornings, is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, you said you then went, when you arrived, you then went in the back after you started work to place an order, and you also saw Trudy getting up to leave, isn't that correct? Or what you thought when she was leaving.
Right.
Now, from where you were standing to get your order, you in fact saw her head towards the cigarette machine when you turned around, is that correct?
Correct.
And from where you were standing getting the order, she would have been directly across from you, from where the machine was and where you would have had to place the order, isn't that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, after she had gotten the cigarettes and turned to leave, Johnny Diamond was standing in the vestibule with his back towards you, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
He was standing directly between you and Trudy. This 6-foot, 200-pound man was between the two of you, is that correct?
Yeah.
So he was actually directly blocking your view of Trudy, or a majority of the view of Trudy, isn't that
I
correct?
was still able to see her head and see her arms and stuff.
Now,
She would sway to the side a little bit, and I'd catch a little glimpse of her, and then, but most of the time, you're right, yeah, he was in the way.
okay, now you said you saw some cigarettes in her left hand,
Correct.
and you said that they looked like they were about to have a fight.
Right.
Is that correct? Now, the room that they were in, pardon?
More fighting, arguing.
The room they were in was a glass room, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And so you could actually see everything that was going on within inside of it. But it was also an enclosed room, isn't that correct?
Mm-hmm.
The door was closed and Johnny Diamond was standing on the other side of the door.
Mm-hmm.
1 minute, Dennis.
So you could not hear anything that was being said, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, you never heard anything that was being said.
No.
For all you know, Johnny could have been asking her, did you take the garbage out yesterday? And when she shook her head no, that's what she was answering to, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were, by your estimation, 15 feet away, unable to hear anything that they were talking about. You saw them talking and you thought this was a fight.
Yeah.
Is it possible that Trudy was depressed? Excuse me, I'll take that back. Then you say you heard a gunshot, saw smoke, and threw her hands over her heart. Isn't that correct? You never actually saw Trudy get shot. Isn't that correct?
No.
In fact, after the first shot, you went to help the dishwasher instead of your friend who might be shot. So you don't know actually what happened, do you?
Well, I went to help the dishwasher. I didn't go to help the dishwasher. I didn't know the dishwasher.
For Mr. Diamond to point the gun at True Doyle's head, correct? Is that correct?
There may have been a valid reason.
What reason did Mr. Diamond tell you why he pointed the gun at his head?
He was trying to, he told me that he was trying to teach her, so, because she had tried to kill herself, and he wanted to show her the importance, or what a serious thing it was to actually die, and kind of scare her out of it.
And this is because she tried to commit suicide previously, correct?
That's what he told me.
And he was worried about this, correct?
Yes.
And you and Mr. Diamond worked together, correct?
Yes, we
And
did.
you knew him well?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you went to high school with him?
Well, we went to the same high school, but I didn't really know him back then.
And you knew he was never in trouble in the past, correct?
I didn't know of any past problem.
And you knew he had a commendable police record, is that not correct?
Yes, it is.
And a matter of fact, you carry the same Mauser gun he does, correct?
Yes.
And you've been involved in domestic disputes before, correct?
Some,
And you know these sometimes are dangerous, correct?
they are.
A lot of times loved ones, they get into a little hassle and tempers flare, correct?
Yes.
Sometimes innocent people get injured, correct?
On occasion.
Surely accidentally, correct?
Each circumstance is different.
It's possible, correct?
Yeah, anything's possible.
Your Honor, may I have a moment to confirm?
Yes.
Times previously,
Objection, Your Honor. I thought we had already agreed with the first, the captain.
No, I believe I denied it.
that's correct. And 2 times previously, Mrs. Doyle tried to commit suicide, correct?
I don't know if she did or not, that's what you told
Objection,
me.
Your Honor. Hearsay.
Your Honor, I believe hearsay exception showing Mr. Diamond's state of mind, as well as reputation as to a person's character, hearsay exception 21, allow that in.
Your Honor, this is being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, specifically, and especially with the incident with the supposed attempt with the aspirin, which there's no independent basis to show.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we first had this argument, counsel, did you not tell me that you were not introducing the death threat for the truth of the matter asserted to show the defendant's state of mind?
True, Your Honor, and we are not objecting to the barbiturate incident. We are objecting specifically to the supposed aspirin incident.
But it seems to me that if the declarant, that being the defendant, thought that Trudy Doyle had tried to commit suicide twice.
And just to repeat, the reason why Mr. Diamond pointed the gun at Ms. Doyle's head, this was to scare her, to keep her from committing suicide, is that correct?
That's what you told me.
No further questions. Please state your full name for the court, sir,
Timothy Larson.
and your occupation.
I'm a captain with the Nita City Police Department.
And how long have you been captain of the United City Police Department?
15 years now.
Are you familiar with this investigation?
Yes, I am. I was the captain for the investigation.
Okay, please tell the court about the March 28th, 1992.
I was dispatched to Dodge Street, 1607 Dodge Street, and was told that a green van that had just burglarized that home would be somewhere on Dodge Street. After I patrolled Dodge Street looking for the van, unable to find it, I went to the home.
Do you know who this van belonged to?
Yes, the dispatch had indicated that the van had belonged to Alan Mark, who was a well-known criminal.
And how do you know this?
He's been arrested before.
And then what occurred?
Not being able to locate the van, I went back to the home of the victim, John Miller, and examined the house.
Your Honor, I'd like to mark these exhibits for identification that states exhibit 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let the record show showing to opposing counsel.
Low below. Yes.
Counsel, it's just being shown to you.
I'm sorry.
Let's not get emotionally involved in the photographs.
Your Honor, can I approach the witness?
We're just having them marked for identification. They'll be marked as State's Composite Exhibit 1 for identification.